Hi, I'm Kevin O'Connor, and welcome back to Ask This Old House, where we'll go anywhere to answer your home improvement questions. Today, anybody can paint a room, but there are good paint jobs and bad paint jobs. And here to show us a good professional paint job is Mark O'Layler.
When this old water heater leaks, it can wreck this beautiful finished basement. We'll make sure this new one doesn't.
And we'll ask, what is it?
9 out of 10 gerbils say they just want to get out. And this is a great way to meet women.
Anybody can paint a room, but there are good paint jobs and bad paint jobs. And here to show us a good professional paint job is Mark O'Layler. Mark, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. What we have here, Kevin, is we have a mock-up of a wall. And what we've done is we've put in a window casing and a door casing. And what I'm going to do today is I'm going to cut in the perimeter with a brush, and then I'm going to roll out the interior for a final product.
Let's start with cutting in and a brush. What makes for a good brush?
Well, there's several things. First of all, you know, it does come down to if it feels good, it probably will work good for you. So for me, a nice balanced brush. This brush here in particular I like. It's a 2.5-inch brush and has an angle on it, so I have a lot of control. I can get up nice and tight to my casings. And then the other issue is the bristles themselves. But this one here bounces back quite easily. And exactly, Kevin, see how this one frays a little bit? Well, those bristles are going to release from the ferrule, this metal band, and they're going to end up on your paint job, and we don't want that.
So we've got ourselves a good brush. Let's use that guy. And you actually don't start by putting paint on it. You put water on it?
That's right. Yeah, what I like to do is wet the bristles themselves so that two things happen. By wetting the bristles, the paint adheres to the bristles more evenly. Therefore, I have more control when I'm actually painting. And then the bristles are easier to clean at the end of the job. I just wet the whole brush in water, and now I'm just going to spin it out in this bucket. And my suggestion is to start slow so that the brush won't kink out.
Right. So damp, but not dripping wet.
That's
now
right.
you're ready to paint.
Now I'm ready to paint. What I like to do is load up my brush with a lot of paint. And I tap it a couple times, and that's a pretty heavily loaded brush. But I've got control of it, and I try to keep the paint on the bottom part, I'd say the bottom 2/3 of the bristles. That way, it won't get up underneath this metal band. Once again, this is called the ferrule, and then dry out and make my brush unusable. So this is quite a bit of paint on my brush right now. And what I'm going to do is put on what I like to call my reservoir. So I stay quite a distance away from my finished product.
But you're putting it on pretty thick.
I am indeed. And what I like to do then is take it and just pick it up and push it back towards that interface with the casing and draw down as far as I can. I can always come back and pick up a little bit more on my reservoir. But what I'm most concerned about right now, Kevin, is creating a nice clean line, because we're considering that this casing is finished product. We're not going to paint this. And I want to make sure that after I've cut a nice clean line, I'm going to come back and tip the entire area that I've just put paint onto so that the paint lays down evenly and uniformly so the finish looks great. So with my next step, I'm going to tackle something a little bit more complicated, this little angle here, but the process is similar. I'm just going to draw on my reservoir, come back, take what's there, come in. This time I tip my brush upside down so I can take advantage of this nice fine point, and I can come in, and I like to shimmy it in, force a bead of paint out on the edge, and then draw up in this case, and meet what I've done prior, and it should work out pretty well. Now I'll tip like I did before. I might tap a little bit here and there to, once again, drawing off my reservoir.
And that's the idea behind the reservoir, saving you trips back and forth to your bucket?
That's right, especially with the new low VOC paints. The paints tend to dry just a little bit faster, so if the paint is already on the wall, I can manipulate it in and around these moldings with pretty good success because it's nice and wet. And then, once again, when I'm feeling confident that it's good enough, I'll just tip it off, and it looks great.
Nice job, Mark.
Thanks.
So that's a casing that we don't want to have to repaint, but there are times when we are going to put a top coat on the trim. So you've got a different technique?
Slightly different. We're actually going to do the same thing. I'm just going to dip my brush into the paint, not worry about it too much, load up the brush as much as I can, and then I'm going to go lefty here. But still, I'm going to do my little reservoir. But this time, since we're going to be painting this casing, I'm going to come back after the wall is finished and cut my nice line. So this time I don't have to worry about it so much. So I'm actually going to overlap just slightly onto my trim.
Deliberately overlap.
Deliberately overlap. It's ever so slight, though. And what that affords me is the ability to come back with my trim paint and create a nice line because I've overlapped. So my trim paint can come nice and tight along that seam, and it'll be a perfect finish.
And I notice that you don't use the blue painter's tape. Why not?
Well, not in this instance. Since I'm coming back to paint the casing anyway, there's really no use for it. Plus, when you do use the blue painter's tape, sometimes the paint rolls under and actually gets on the surface you're trying to keep it off of. So only in special situations would I use the blue tape. And Kevin, as I'm painting, I keep track of how dry the paint is on this upper edge of my bristles, because if I let it go too long, it'll start to pill up and create little dried, crusty edges. So I'm going to go into the same water that I used first time around to wet my brush, and this time wet it because I want to clean it.
So you're cleaning your brush as you're painting a room?
Yes, and it's really important to do that for a couple of reasons. It makes cleaning at the end of the job better, but more importantly, for the wall that I'm painting today, it'll make my finished product that much cleaner. I won't be leaving little crusty bits of paint on the wall. So here I go. I'm going to finish this baseboard. And now if I wasn't going to paint the baseboard, then I would use the blue painter's tape that you talked about earlier, Kevin, just so that, number one, there wouldn't be any paint that would get on the finished product, and also when I'm rolling later on, there won't be any stipple drips that would fall on the baseboard. And Kevin, on those rare occasions when I do create a drip, what I do is take my 5-in-1 tool, every painter's friend, and I like to wrap it in a cloth, and then with that cloth, I go down to the little drip that I created here. Perfect. Yeah, it works well, and we're ready for rolling. Picking a good roller cover is important, Kevin, and let me tell you why. This roller in particular stands out as being fluffy. Looks good, looks like it might do a good job, but in fact, the lint comes right off. All these fibers, they end up on your wall, and it looks lousy. So I like a roller cover that has a nice, tight fiber quality. This one in particular is 3/8 inch thick, and it's perfect for our smooth wall over here.
Okay.
But even with this one, it releases some lint. So what I like to do, a little technique I picked up, is take a little duct tape and just run the roller cover over the duct tape.
Really?
A couple times, yep. And even with this one that's advertised as lint-free, you're going to get a couple little lint bunnies, if you will, left over on the duct tape.
All right.
But I take it one step further. I actually dip this into water.
Just like your brush.
Similar to the brush. And use the same spinning tool to get the water off.
And this guy's going to hold a roller cover as well as a brush. That's clever.
That's right. Yeah, great tool.
So again, we're starting with a damp surface here for a latex paint.
Yep, and for the same reasons. It cleans up easier. I can use it multiple times, and then it applies paint in a nice uniform fashion, so the finish is really sweet.
Let's get some paint on the wall.
Okay, here we go. Loaded up my roller arm.
Now, you're not using a tray. You're using this bucket.
Yeah, this is a bucket that I've picked up years ago, and I find that it has everything I need in one tool. It has a nice little handy holder area, holster, if you will, for my brush. And then my roller arm just sits right on my vertical tray. This is the most common tray that people use, and it works fine, but in order to get most flexibility out of my bucket, I like this product here.
All right.
So with this inverted tray, I roll my paint onto the roller cover as uniformly as possible. I really want to saturate the nap with as much paint as possible, because then I don't have to come back to the bucket more often than necessary. And I roll it on so that it's uniformly on the roller cover and there's no dripping. So let's come up to where my ceiling's cut in, and then with my roller arm, I'm going to get as close as I can to the ceiling, theoretical ceiling in this case. And once again, I'm going to put on a nice 2-foot swath of paint, if you will.
And you're not even going across the entire wall. You just got a little 2-3 foot section there.
Right. I try to only apply the paint the width of which I can handle before it starts to dry. So I'm going to go left to right, and I'm going to keep everything as uniformly wet at the same time.
Okay.
So now I'm going to chase that wet edge, make sure it doesn't set up before I can finish the wall. And I do work in a rectangular box fashion, if you will. So I'm going to go the full length of my wall, and I'm not worried too much about the way I apply the paint, but I am going to stay tight in a nice rectangular fashion, put it on as uniformly as I can. So I'm almost finished. I'm going to bring it up alongside where I stopped on my horizontal rolling application.
So with the roller, as you're working this rectangle, you want to chase this wet edge, but you actually wanted the stuff that you cut in along the trim to dry before you put the roller on this wall?
That's right. I go to great lengths to make sure that I do not roll out the wall until the perimeter is dry.
Completely dry.
That's right, because if I don't, you know what ends up happening as I'm rolling along that brushed in area? It starts to lift and pill and do the same thing that happens on my dry brush.
All right.
So I'm just going to roll out this last bit, and then I'm going to do my final tip across this entire wall. And this area is small enough that I can get by with doing it all at the same time. I wouldn't recommend it to someone who hasn't had a little bit more experience, but the paint is pretty forgiving. It's all still wet right now, and the last little technique that I like to share is I come from the bottom and do one careful, controlled tip up.
And this is evening it all out for you right now.
And as I'm rolling up, I overlap slightly on the last upstroke. That way, it all stays wet uniformly and looks really sweet when I'm done. So each upward stroke that I make, I do a slight overlap on the previous stroke. And as I'm doing that, I'm also just slightly putting pressure on the right-hand side, lifting the left-hand side up a little bit so that I don't create any ridges of paint.
All right, well, good tip and beautiful wall mark. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Guys, take a look at this. It has a red metal handle. On the end, it has a cylinder that turns and squeaks. What is it?
I will take this, boys. I know it. You know, a lot of people have dogs. Take them out every single morning for a walk, right? It's good for them and good for the dogs. There are other animals, though, that should go for a walk, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, like a fish.
Well, fish they swim. Birds, they fly.
Snake?
Legless. All right? There are other ones. You know, think about a guinea pig, a ferret, a gerbil. Those little mice.
Well, they're in the cage. They have that wheel that turns.
Do you know how boring that is?
I know.
They
More
can
boring
go
than
right.
this.
That's right. They go in here. You go right down the street. 9 out of 10 gerbils say they just want to get out. You know what I mean? And this is a great way to meet women.
Oh, what a nice gerbil you have.
Yeah, you need to get out, okay, pal?
If you know what I mean.
This reminds me, you know, my grandmama had one of these. Oh, yeah, she used to be a car hop.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, delivered burgers and milkshakes on roller skates.
Really?
And she didn't want to give it up.
You know, you never know when to quit. You really don't.
And with this, you don't have to. This is actually a rolling cane, and you can use it on the roller skates, and she still does. She's
Grammy Okie.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You get your
should
moves
see
from your grandmama?
Oh, no, she's not quite as graceful as I am. You should see her on a snowboard. Burning it up. Oh, yeah.
Do you notice how many acorns there were this year? They were everywhere.
Drives me nuts.
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 I got hit. I got hit in the head.
Did it?
I know.
Well, they're hard to pick up, but this is actually a tool made for picking up acorns and pecans. Now, the acorns are just spread out on the ground.
You wouldn't have to pick them up if you didn't dump them out.
You just take this tool and roll it right over.
Oh, look at
Pop
that.
in there.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah, look at it. And in no time at all, they're loaded up with acorns. Full.
Acorn with your milkshake, Grandma?
Well, we lived in our house now for almost a month, and whenever we fill up our bathtub with hot water, we notice the discoloration in it.
There's like some kind of little debris particles in the bottom of the tub you can see. We don't want to be bathing in dirty water. The whole reason to take a bath is to get clean, and can't do it in this.
Well, Bruce, anytime I hear the complaint that you've got, that you're getting rust or dirt out of the hot water side of your faucets, it makes me think of right here. You got a tank-type water heater. Now, tank-type water heater has a cold water feed that comes in, that brings the cold water in to be heated. Once it's heated, it leaves through this pipe out to the faucets. Now, yours is actually a gas-fired water heater, but it doesn't go into a chimney with this vent. You can see this PVC pipe right here. This goes to outside, and it uses a fan like this called a power venter.
Is that what I hear when we turn the hot water on?
That's right. Do you hear it upstairs?
Sometimes.
All right. So a tank like this, we can actually tell its age. On any water heater, there's a rating plate that has the model number and the serial number, and this one's about 7 years old.
Why do I care how old it is?
Well, 7 years is exactly what the warranty is. It's getting ready to fail. Now, people see this nice shiny tank on the outside, this outer casing. It's got insulation. But on the inside, there's a steel tank. And this steel is how they form the tank. But on the inside where the water touches, look at this coating right here. It's an enamel coating. And that means it won't allow that steel to rust. Well, over time, you can get pit corrosion, and sooner or later, you have a hole, and that's going to put water all over this basement.
We really don't want water all over my basement.
All right? So let's get this thing out and get a new one installed before it leaks. Okay, first thing I did was to shut off the gas supply. Now unplug the electricity. Now I want to get the water out of the tank, so I should shut off the cold water feed coming into the tank. This is a ball valve. And when I turn it perpendicular to the water supply, it shuts it off. To get the water out, we're going to use a pump. So I just open the drain valve right here at the bottom. Good. If I open all the hot water faucets, she'll break the vacuum, and every bit of the hot water goes back to the water heater. Okay. That whining means we've got all the water out of the water heater. Good. So this is the hot water line I'm going to cut right up here. I'm going to clean it first. I'm going to cut it up pretty high, just so I can get rid of all these elbows that the original installer put in. I've got a tubing cutter that makes it easy. And just turn it. This is a self-tightening tubing cutter. Good. And now for the coals. Good. Now we just have to disconnect the gas, and we can take it right out of here. To disconnect the gas, I just need to break this connection called a union. Breaks away, good. Okay. All right, Bruce, I'm just going to wheel this out. I want you to take the top here with the handles. I'm going to tip it to you. Okay, careful. There you go. I'm going to have you back right up the bulkhead, okay? Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Be careful. Step at a time, careful. All right, so here's our new tank, and they always have standard connections. Cold water that comes in and hot water that comes out. And these are threaded connections. Now, on the cold water side, what you don't see is that there is a dip tube. This is a tube that goes down to the very bottom of the tank and puts the cold water way down at the bottom where it can be heated by the burner. As it gets heated, the heated water rises because it's lighter, and it'll leave through this fitting right here. Now, the other thing that you have in this water heater is an anode rod. You can see it right at the top, but you can't really see what it looks like inside. And this is it right here. This is a sacrificial anode made out of magnesium. Anytime you have water in the presence of metal, there can be electrolysis. Electrolysis goes after that metal, tries to eat it. So instead of letting it go after the tank, it goes after the anode rod here.
Is there any maintenance for that?
Well, it's really up to you. If you were to take a special wrench and back this anode out and check it periodically, every year or two, and made sure this wasn't corroded, you could put it back in, everything's fine. But if it was corroded and you changed it, you could get 10, 20, even 30 years out of a water heater. I'm applying Teflon tape to the threads of each of these connections, both the hot and the cold. These are 3/4 threaded connections. Now on the cold water side, I have a water heater T. In this case, it has 3/4 copper connection here, a thread right here. There's also a tapping right here for the vacuum valve. Now the vacuum valve is designed to break the vacuum anytime you want to service the water heater. You shut the water off, it allows the air in so we can get the water out of the tank. And on the hot side, it's just a 3/4 threaded by 3/4 copper connection. All right, so let's muscle the water heater in. We'll line it up and make our connections. Okay, so that's not bad for the gas. That's good for the water, right about there. Good. So now we just clean, flux, and solder up our connections. So Bruce, right underneath the shutoff valve, I've added another valve right here. Now, this is pretty cool. This actually is a solenoid valve, and the control head screws right onto that valve. It plugs into 110 volts, and right down here is a sensor that we can put right down at the floor next to the water heater. Now, if that water heater ever leaked, this moisture sensor would pick that up and shut the water pressure off immediately and not flood the whole basement.
That's great.
Isn't that cool? All right. And now we just reconnect our gas using black threaded pipe. Bruce, just grab that power venter for me, would you? All right, great. So this is now pretty much a conventional water heater. It actually could vent into a chimney, but you don't have one. This is actually a pretty ingenious device. It is a fan to pull the flue gases to outside, but built in is also all the safety devices, the temperature safety and the fan proving switch, so that if the fan ever failed, it wouldn't let the burner come on. All right, so we just need to make an electrical connection right there, attach it to the top of the water heater, and it vents out through this PVC. Squeeze it together and hold it for a 5 count. Let that glue set up. All right, the water heater's firing, the vent's on, pretty quiet.
Very quiet.
All right, so you're going to have clean, hot water, and that's good, right?
Great.
All right, now you're also going to have a dry basement because I've put a bead of caulking right here. If any water came out of this water heater, it would collect inside of the bead. Now, the automatic shutoff valve has this sensor down here. There's two. If moisture came between those ports, it would make the contact. It would shut off that shutoff valve, so no more water would come in and give you an alarm contact.
Okay.
Gives you sleep at night, and you have plenty of clean, hot water.
Oh, that's great.
Enjoy.
You know what? I love that emergency shutoff. I've never seen that before.
It'll shut the water off, and you will really know it. Listen to this.
That will get your attention.
Absolutely.
All right, great information, guys. Thank you. And if you've got a question about your house, we'd love to hear from you. So keep your letters and your emails coming. And until next time, I'm Kevin O'Connor.
I'm Rich Chathui.
I'm Tom Silva.
And I'm Roger Cook.
For Ask This Old House. So you really got that one more in the hot water.
What we do. Put them in and out of hot water.
Next time on Ask This Old House, we're going to try something just a little bit different. Over the course of 2 episodes, we're taking the whole show through the heartland of the country to 4 different states.
Live from Tulsa.
Hello, Little Rock.
Good morning, Wichita. When you want a totally random planting, you got to be totally random.
We're going to make some house calls, and you can bet we're going to have some fun along the way. What do you say? We get to it. If you have a question about your house or a tip you'd like to share, please let us know. Visit our website, pbs.org, for expert advice, step-by-step videos, and much more. This Old House magazine, the companion to the television series, provides advice from our experts that you've come to know. You can use your credit card to order 10 monthly issues for $10 by calling 1-800-221-5900.